This is a video on probability and using tree diagrams. So my question is, I've got a bag of marbles, I want to take one out, note the colour, and put it back in, and then pick another marble. And I've got two questions then. Probability of picking a blue first and a green, and a blue and green in any order. Now in this scenario there are two different things happening. The first marble that's been chosen, and the second marble that's been chosen. So when I go to draw my tree diagram for this, I'm going to have a column for each of those events. I'm going to have a column for my outcomes, and I'm going to have a column for my probabilities. So when I set that table up, this is how it should look. And the reason that I'm dividing up my space is just because when I go to draw a tree diagram, they can get very messy very quickly. So it's just helping me to stay organised more than anything else. So in my first column, I'm going to start off by just drawing a dot. And this is my starting point. All my events are going to come out of this. So in my first column, marble 1 has two possible different outcomes, blue or green. So I'm going to draw two lines to represent that. And at the end of each of these lines, I'm going to put a bubble to represent the possible outcomes. And I'm going to write in the outcomes into these bubbles, and I can abbreviate, so B for blue and G for green. And then I'm going to move on to my second event, which is marble 2. Now, if I got a blue in my first marble, I can still, since I've put my marble back in, I can still get blue or green on the second marble. So again, I'll draw my two branches and put my bubbles at the end. So I could still get blue or green on the second marble. And the same is true if I got green the first time, because I've put it back into the bag. So again, I could still get blue or green the second time round. And I'm representing that by my two lines and my two bubbles. I also want to record the probabilities of each of these events. So going back to my first scenario, marble 1, I've got my bag up here, two blues and one green. So I'm going to write in along the line that I drew, the probability of blue. So the probability of blue was 2 out of 3, and the probability of green was 1 out of 3. Now I put those marbles back in again. So when I go to work out my probabilities for marble 2, they're actually not going to be changed at all. So the probability for blue is still 2/3, for green it's 1/3, for blue it's 2/3, for green it's 1/3. My next column is the outcomes column, and to fill in the outcomes column I'm going to follow each possible path from my original dot to the very last bubble in each case. So for example here, blue blue, blue green, green blue, and finally green green. So they're all my possible options. And in the final column I'm going to fill in my probabilities. And the probabilities will be got in each case by multiplying the probabilities that I pass along a path. So for example, the probability of getting blue and then blue is 2/3 by 2/3. And that's going to give me 4/9 in this case. Blue and green is going to give me 2/9. Green and blue is going to give me 2/9, and green is going to give me 1/9. And notice there, as I'm doing that, I'm saying green, and of course we know that and is dealt with by multiplication in probability. To check that I am correct, or at least have a high degree of confidence in my question being correct at this point, I'm just going to tot up my probabilities. And what do you think they should add up to? Well, if I've done it correctly and I've exhausted all the possible options, then I should have a total of 1 here at the end. Now let's go back and have a look at the questions that we were asked to answer. So the first question was, find the probability of blue first and then green. So to find this probability, all I have to do is go down through my outcomes list and select the ones that it applies to. So blue first and then green is going to be this particular outcome. So my probability is going to be 2/9. And I'll just make a note of that down at the bottom. So the probability of blue, then green, is 2/9. And the second part of the question asked me to find the probability of blue and green in any order. So again, I'll go down through my list of outcomes and I'll select the ones that apply. So blue and green in any order, so this one still applies, but I could equally take this GB because I've got blue and green there as well. When I've selected those, I then go to their probabilities and I add any probabilities that go with the outcomes that I've selected. So again, I'll go down to the bottom of my page, probability of blue and green in any order is going to be, well, I've got 2/9 and 2/9, so the total is 4/9. And just to point out there that when I'm working out my probabilities in the column, I multiply each number that I pass, and when I want to select multiple things from the outcomes, then I add the probabilities from the final column.